Good morning, Coach.
Good morning, Gary.
Good to have you. Hey, listen, I know you've probably had a lot of busy weeks in your coaching career, but have you had anything that's topped the last week or so, the last 7 or 8 days?
Not even close. You look down at your watch, it's 5:30, you missed lunch. It's every time you make a call or you do something, you get off the phone and you're further behind with texts and emails and calls, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been an amazing week. It's been awesome.
I hear you. I know you're excited. We could hear it in the press conference. Let's talk about, before we get strictly to Alabama, coaches often have to wear two hats. It's kind of part of the business. Sometimes you leave one job to go to another and you have to finish up the task at hand, but rarely does it happen between Alabama and Auburn. But here you were already named the new head baseball coach at the University of Alabama, but trying to see this 2017 season through all the way with the Auburn Tigers, and an amazing run in the regional. Came up just short against Florida State. But what was that like, having to kind of multitask and I know trying to get started with Alabama, but at the same time being loyal to those players and the job that you had to finish out at Auburn?
It was pretty unique, and I'm just so thankful to Jay Jacobs at Auburn and Butch Thompson at Auburn and Greg Byrne here. Everybody was so helpful, and we all worked together to find a plan that worked for everyone. As a coach, you're always teaching your kids to finish what they do, finish strong, and I just didn't think it was right for me to walk out on that team at the biggest point in the season. So very thankful that I could finish the season with Auburn. Love those coaches, love those kids. And it really wasn't – once I got to the field and got in the dugout, it was really nice to be able to turn my phone off and just focus on that team at that moment. When I got back to the hotel and turned the phone on, then I was – working hard for Alabama baseball, so it actually went pretty well. Yeah,
you said something, too, in your press conference that resonated with me, and I think it did with a lot of fans, regardless of who they pull for. You said, when you're in coaching, you're wearing a logo, you're wearing a jersey, but you're loyal to the players. You're loyal to the kids that you coach, and that stays with you the rest of your life, whether it's Kentucky, Auburn, now Alabama. Kind of expand on that. So, as you said, yes, you were turning the page to Alabama, but there was no doubt that you were going to finish it out with Auburn because you had a relationship with those young men. You'd recruited a lot of them.
Exactly. I'm a relationship person, and I think I love baseball, don't get me wrong, but I think if I was forced to get out of college coaching, I'd probably be more apt to get into a field where I was working with young people before I would just simply get in a pure baseball position. And that's everything, and I think the casual fan may not truly realize what we all go through together, how much time and effort and energy, and we laugh together, we cry together. That's the beauty of team sports, and I love those relationships, and then that's why I'm going to keep doing what I do.
Let's get to Alabama, and I know you've already crunched the numbers, but I'll rattle a few of them off. You'll be the third head coach in the last 3 years. This past season, 5 SEC wins, only 19 wins overall. Incredible facility, great tradition, great history, but no College World Series trip since 1999. Clearly, this is a rebuilding job. You've been through real rebuilding jobs at Kentucky, at Auburn. That's got to help you, but at the same time, you're facing a big task here in Tuscaloosa. Just kind of tell me what the first order of business is to kind of get this train on the right track.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is a lot of work to be done. That's why I'm here. And fortunately, I've done it twice in this league, and the SEC is a tough league to rebuild in. But with that being said, there are some really good pieces in place here, and we've got so much to sell. I walk around here and I see our ballpark, I see our campus. I know what Alabama football and that experience is. And I'm like, hey, we can get some good baseball players here. This is a program that's been to the College World Series. This is a program that's had 66 Major League Baseball players. So it can be done here. And it's all going to come down to recruiting and player development and team culture. Those are the three things that we're never going to be distracted from. And if you get the right people in your program, you do everything you can to help them become the best version of themselves as a baseball player, and you have a group of people all tugging in the same direction and playing for each other, then we can do some big things.
Recruiting is selling. You're selling a product. You alluded to the facility. The Sewell Thomas Stadium, the new Joe, is remarkable. Obviously, working here, I've been fortunate enough to tour it on a couple of occasions. So in addition to the great, beautiful campus, all the tradition and history, what about this facility? Having a facility like this to go out and sell to recruits, how big is that?
It's huge, and it's a big deal to kids. I think anything you do in life, first impressions are important. And your first impression of Alabama baseball is you walk in and you say, hey, this school, this athletic department is serious about having a great baseball team. That is your first impression as a coach or as a prospective student athlete. And it's a great place to start a visit.
Coach Brad Bohannon, our guest here on the Bud Light Hotline on the Gary Harris Show. You can follow him on Twitter, and I would encourage you to do so at Coach Bo_Bama. That's at Coach Bo_Bama. Let's talk about the situation as far as putting this roster together, Coach. You've got to come in here. You've got to meet with the players that are set to return. Obviously, the draft is always a factor. You've got to put together a recruiting class the best you can. You've got the previous coaching staff had signed a number of players. You're hamstrung by only 11.7 total scholarships in regards to aid. How difficult is that job, just coming in and trying to figure out this roster going forward?
Well, putting together a roster in college baseball is a huge task in itself. It's really a puzzle with a lot of moving pieces. You know, we're trying to put together a team that has left and right-handed pitching, left and right-handed hitting, that has speed, that has power, that can score when the wind's blowing in, can score when the wind's blowing out, they can defend the field. And there's all these moving pieces of whether it's kids on the team who may or may not be coming back, and then that major league draft is going to have a huge impact. So we'll get through the next 3 days with the draft, and that'll trim our group to some degree, and then we'll kind of work through it. But it's a real challenge, and it's a challenge for everybody everywhere that's in college baseball.
Putting together a staff. You've been a part of a staff. This is your first time as a head coach to actually put together your own staff. You already announced the hiring of Jerry Zulli coming over from Louisiana Tech, also experience at South Alabama, which will be huge, Missouri in the SEC, Memphis, so he knows the lay of the land. Talk about that first hire.
I love Jerry Zulli, and I was so fired up to get him on staff. He's one of the best in the business. And when you work in recruiting, which I've done the last 14 years, you know who's really good, because we're the ones out there in the trenches. And besides having all the basic intangibles of high character and integrity and work ethic and personality and being a skilled evaluator of knowing what skill set wins at this level, everywhere that Jerry has been, he's always gotten a couple of players a year that had no business going to that school, whether it was South Alabama, Missouri,
Right.
You get to the next year and you're like, that kid should not be there. He should be at Auburn or Alabama or wherever. So he's somebody I've known a really long time. I really trust him. I have an exceptionally high opinion of him, and he was an absolute slam dunk for me from day one.
Coach, will he handle the hitters, or are you not ready to make any kind of announcement in regards to his duties yet?
I'm not ready to make an announcement. Jerry and I, we've known each other 15 years. We share a lot of the same thoughts on offensive baseball and on the hitting piece. So he and I will both work with position players, and we're going to get the rest of our staff field so I can kind of take a look at everybody's strengths and weaknesses before I get really specific about who's going to do what.
You're listening to the Gary Harris Show on Tide 102.9, 100.9. We're talking with Alabama baseball coach Brad Bohannon on the Bud Light Hotline. Recruiting-wise, and granted, you've got a great reputation. You go to Kentucky, not a lot there, and you're trying to help build a program there, and you're recruiting all over the country. I mean, you're going, and out of the country for that matter. You went wherever you could find players. You get to Auburn, a little better recruiting base, a little more regional recruiting, and now you come to Alabama, and you've got experience in the SEC. But there seems to be, to me, a fertile recruiting ground right here in the Southeast when you talk about Alabama and Florida and Georgia, so forth and so on. Recruiting philosophy for Alabama, what's that going to be like?
I think no matter where you are, that you want to work from the inside out. Kids in your state, generally, they want to be at your school. The state of Alabama loves the University of Alabama and its athletics programs. So we'll work from the inside out. There's a tremendous amount of outstanding high school coaches, junior college coaches, travel baseball coaches in the amateur baseball in our state. I would love to fill our roster with all Alabama kids. But with that being said, we're a national brand thanks to Coach Saban and what our football program is doing, and we can get anybody from anywhere. So we'll start inside out, and it's going to be all about picking the right guys.
Coach, I've probably beat this 11.7 to death going back to years ago when I worked in Mississippi when Ron Polk was making this point 30 years ago about how unfair it was in college baseball. And now in the SEC, you're dealing with states that basically can offer a lot more scholarships due to the lottery and so forth. But it is what it is. You've got 11.7. That's what you're stuck with. Talk about the challenges of dealing with that, particularly when you're going up against schools that are able to maneuver around that and have basically a lot more aid to offer.
You know, Gary, I think that's something a lot of people that aren't truly involved in college baseball don't realize that, you know, we have 11.7 baseball scholarships, but every school has access to different amounts of financial aid, academic aid, state lottery money, and, you know, our school doesn't have a lot of that. But with that being said, I've never had much extra aid being at Kentucky and Auburn. I mean, 11.7 is kind of all I know.
Right.
You know, it is what it is, and like I said in the press conference, I'm not going to talk about what we don't have. You know, I'm going to talk about what we do have, and we have a top 5 stadium in college baseball. We have Alabama football experience. We have a tremendous university. We have SEC baseball experience. We have so much to sell that we're going to be just fine. Influences,
and clearly John Cohen, Gary Henderson, Butch Thompson, guys you've worked under. I'm assuming they've been huge influences on you. Maybe somebody that we don't know from maybe when you were a player or coming up that influenced you, and not just in terms of your coaching style, but how you treat people.
That is a great question, and instead of giving you a specific name, I'll say this, and the kids don't realize this, but during your coaching career, the kids have such a huge impact on the coaches. And I've learned so much from my players, and I think that's a strength of mine is, you know, if you're a good listener and you pay attention, like even your kids will teach you a lot. So it's hard for me to just put one name on it, but I would say in addition to, you know, the coaches that I've worked with, I've learned so much from my players over time.
Awesome. Greg Byrne, clearly he hired you, so I know you're going to have loyalty to him, but how important and exciting is it to have an AD that has a reputation as a baseball guy? The John Cohen hire at Mississippi State worked out so well. Jay Johnson, we saw what he did his first year at Arizona. How big a factor is that for you as a head coach to have an AD that you feel like is going to give you all the resources you need to be successful?
It's huge because college baseball is so unique. And having somebody that understands it at a really high level is everything. And, you know, there's so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes as far as us being successful and us putting ourselves in a position to be successful. It is awesome to have an AD that really gets it. And on top of that, like you said, you look at his background of hiring coaches, it gives me a tremendous amount of confidence of, hey, this guy knows what he's doing and he believes in me. And that's a great feeling.
We saw a first-year head coach at Mississippi State this year do a great job. Same thing at Kentucky. Fans say they want to be patient, but then when the season gets here, they always want to win. I know you're still evaluating the roster. You did see Alabama up close for 3 games down at Plainsman Park, and Alabama came in there and swept Auburn. What about this ball club, the one you're inheriting without the new players coming in? I know you're trying to evaluate these players. What do you think about the talent level here? Have you had an opportunity to kind of get a feel for it?
You know, I'm working through that right now, Gary, and based on 4 games this spring and all the research I've done, you know, there's a nice group of returning position players. You know, we're going to have some older kids in the lineup with some strength. The first thing that we have to attack is the pitching piece, and that's anywhere. I mean, it all starts and ends on the mound. But there's some good pieces, and I can assure you that nobody is going to have higher expectations for this program than our coaching staff.
Coach, I got to ask you the million-dollar question because I've been around coaches a long time, and they always tell me, you know, as an assistant, I tried to soak in as much as I could. I watched my head coaches at different places I worked, but there's nothing that prepares you for being a head coach like being a head coach. Here you are, even though you've got a lot of SEC experience, you're taking on a big job right off the bat. No mid-major experience as a head coach or D2 level, anything like that. What do you think the biggest challenge will be from being an assistant to making that jump to being a head coach, or challenges for that matter?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've worked for 3 outstanding head coaches that were virtually first-time head coaches in John Cohen, Gary Henderson, and Butch Thompson. And, you know, the biggest thing is when you're the head coach, it's a different role. It's a different job. And as an assistant, all you do is coach and recruit. you spend everything, and those are not easy jobs, and you pour everything you have into recruiting and player development. And as a head coach, you have to be involved in so many different areas at a different level. So that'll be the biggest adjustment. And, I'm as prepared as I'm ever going to be. I can do it or I can't. I've had tremendous models. I've been in this league. I've got as much experience as I'm going to get. And over time, the scoreboard and the win-loss record is going to show whether I can do it or not.
We kind of touched on it at the top, and I know you got a million things to do, so I'm about to let you go. But this was kind of a whirlwind. I mean, Alabama didn't even have an opening, and then all of a sudden it opens up. The next thing you know, you're here, you're the head coach. So much to do in such a short time to do it in. But even just a couple of weeks ago, I mean, I know you were at a good program. You were working hard for Auburn. Could you have imagined that you would be the head coach at the University of Alabama?
You have these dreams as a young coach of being a head coach in this league at a place like Alabama, and there are so many tremendously talented and successful coaches that don't get an opportunity like this. So you always dream about it, you hope for it, you work for it, and that doesn't mean it's going to happen. So this is a dream come true. It's a responsibility that I do not take lightly. I can feel the passion. I can feel how hungry our administration, our department, our community is to pack the Joe and to have a team that's competing for championships and playing this time of year. So it is a dream come true. I'm excited. I'm also I'm not taking lightly what's at stake here.
Finally, Coach, you mentioned that you taught with Jim Wells. He had an amazing run here when he came to Alabama in the mid-'90s and 4 World Series trips, I think, in a 5 or 6 year span, including a runner-up finish in '97. Accomplished some amazing things. I remember when I first got to Tuscaloosa, the old Joe, it would be standing room only. They'd be bringing in temporary bleachers to take care of the fans. So I know what this place can be. I know how hungry this town is for a winner in college baseball in this campus community. What did Coach Wells have to say to you that you think will prove valuable in your quest to build the program and get it back to Omaha the way he did so many times?
Well, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Wells. I did when I coached against him, and he's one of the best coaches and arguably the best coach in Alabama baseball history. And I did have an extended conversation with him, and probably one of the reasons he was a great coach is he kept things simple. And he said this: "Hey, Brad, do a good job of hiring the right people. Do a good job of getting the right folks on your coaching team and get really good players. And if you have the right coaches and the right players, you're going to give yourself a chance."
And our final 30 seconds, any timetable on hiring a pitching coach?
I'm hopeful by the end of this week. I've been hammering the phones the past several days, and I've had some folks on campus and getting really close. I'm really hoping we can announce something here the next few days.
Well, Coach, I know you're really busy. I appreciate you carving out some time for us. I've enjoyed it. I look forward to sitting down with you soon, too, for a television interview as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. Roll Tide.